Hello and welcome back to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charlie Mann of law firm Alchemy. And oh boy, my guest today. I am excited to talk with him, a guy who I know his energy can match, maybe even exceed my own, someone who clearly has enthusiasm for life, for the law, for entrepreneurship, for personal growth, for all the good stuff. Someone who, when I saw him posting content online, I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to hang out with this guy a little bit. Got to see him in person at a conference, be on his podcast. And we've been trying to get him on here, scheduling, yada, yada. It's a few months after we intended, but we're here now with Tom Tona, the founder and CEO of TonaLaw. Tom, welcome to the show.
Charlie, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. How are you?
I am great. And I can't wait to hear your answer to the question, what's the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
That law school is graduation is the very beginning.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more.
Sure. So, I think about what you do, right? Law firm Alchemy, coaching. A lot of younger lawyers that I've seen come into the firm, they're like, well, I graduated law school. I'm like, okay, and this is the beginning, right? And so what I mean by that is there are levels to this game that are still revealing themselves to me now. And I've been doing this going on 30 years, right? So the one warning I would put out is, when you graduate, you're a blank slate. And just be a sponge. Just be a sponge.
So I'm curious, when you came out of law school, were you prepared to be a sponge, or were you just trying to lock into a way that things were done and just, plug in and be like, all right, I'm just going to walk this simple career path?
No, I knew that I knew nothing. I knew that the degree itself only has value that you can assign to it by what you do, right? So I was hungry and I was determined to always be the hardest worker in the room, period.
Was that something that you saw demonstrated when you were younger, or was that a skill that you developed once you started moving into law school and into a law firm?
Definitively, my father was the influence on my work ethic. I mean, he was a very hardworking man, blue collar, super saver, super investor, all self-taught.
Interesting. Okay, so saver and investor. So that kind of dichotomy right there. Sometimes people will only go in one direction or the other, and you kind of have gone to a whole other level of it, of entrepreneurship. So I'm curious where that comes from for you.
I think it's growing up blue collar. And so for me, I watched my dad. He was a super hard worker and he didn't make a lot of money, but what he did with it was super smart. And what he did was he showed me and my brother through, by his example only. It's not like he sat us down and said, listen, this is how you accumulate wealth. But by watching him and dedicating a portion of everything that he took home financially, you saw the power of compounding interest. You saw the power of letting your money work for you when you're sleeping. And so you make hard decisions and you live an easier life later on versus the easy decision of I want to buy the flashy stuff. I want the name brand stuff and all of that stuff. And then you're living a hard life for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, you're always playing catch up. Now that investor mentality, how has that manifested itself in investments you've made in scaling your law firm?
Huge comparison to the extent that my father did not have a business. My father worked for a business, and no one in my family really was an entrepreneur. And my brother and I both entrepreneurs. And so how it translated was, to me, your single best investment is always going to be your business, you, right? So who am I going to bet on that's going to give me a better ROI than me and my business and my team?
So some of those investments, yourself, your team, when you look back on the firm, what are 2 or 3 key investments that were like the best personal stocks you ever bought?
Okay, awesome. That's an awesome question. So, the 2 or 3 key ones for me that come to mind are one, and I say it all the time. People are probably sick of hearing it. Coaching, right? There is a reason why from now through Thanksgiving, I will be on a plane flying around the country for masterminds, and some of my coaches are holding their masterminds. And, you know, I just spoke to a friend of mine. He's coaching right now as we speak down in Puerto Rico. And if you're in the law or the business of law and you're not coaching in whatever you want to be an expert at, you cannot get to those higher levels. You just can't. Oh, it's all trial and error. So the amount of money you're going to lose, you should have spent on coaching, be a lot less painful.
That's right.
Right.
So that's investment number 1.
Investment number 2 was after the coaching, investing in the execution of the coaching, right? So they can give you the tools, but then you have to put them to work, and that takes money. And then investment number 3 is just a pure, I made investments in mass torts as a business model after speaking with an expert in the field, and those mass torts have rewarded me handsomely as a pure ROI.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's one of those spaces where, some people will lose their shirt because they just kind of jump in blindly. So I'm curious, that seeking out an expert, that whole process for you of identifying a great opportunity for mass tort, what did that look like? And what did it take for you to pull the trigger on that?
So it's a funny story. I know we're pressed for time. So I'll try to
give the whole thing, man. We'll have you back on the show. Don't worry, Tom.
So I do general liability, heavy in premises, heavy in auto like everybody else, and heavy in brain injury. So one day I get a consent to change attorney across my desk. It's a law firm I never heard of. They're a Manhattan law firm. And I called the guy. I said, don't take this the wrong way. I know most of the players that are doing Long Island personal injury. I don't know your name. He goes, don't worry about the case. I'm gonna give you a third on it. Don't worry about it. Let's meet for lunch. So, all right, I'll meet for lunch. Now, I was a gentleman to him. He was a gentleman to me. So the real attribute of how I got in there was we were open-minded and we were not, can I curse?
Yeah, why not?
All right. Neither one of us was an asshole to the other. And I've been on the other end of those calls. I'm like, this guy has no idea. This lady has no idea. I'm not going to do business with her. Let her fight over the small whatever. So with him, we went to lunch, and I figured I was going to be selling him on the B2B silo I have. And meanwhile, I walked out 2 hours later. I'm like, I want to do mass torts with this guy. So we became friends. I know the guy almost 10 years now. We've been doing it together, and he's one of the top in the space. And it was just having an open mind and having an abundance mindset versus somebody has to lose in order for me to win, right? He is the most generous guy you'll ever meet, and he's made more money than anyone I know, and he's just breaking 40 years old at this point.
Wow.
But he makes everybody money. He's super generous with it. He does things he does not have to do for you as a referral partner. Yeah. And so valuing the relationship above the transaction was the key to opening that door.
That's really powerful. So, I mean, usually when somebody's as driven and observant as you sees that behavior, I often find that they search for ways to duplicate that. So in experiencing that from him, how have you duplicated that effect in your own firm?
That's a really astute question, because as I'm starting to see, one of the other things they don't teach you in law school is there are levels. Yeah. There are levels. Like, so in martial arts, I got a black belt hanging on the wall, and there's levels even at black belt, right? And jiu-jitsu, like, there's black belts. Like, I'm a hobbyist. I'm 56 years old. I'm broken. And then you got competitive savages at the highest level. It's the
Yeah.
same thing in the business space and the same thing in the law space, right?
Mhm.
So, there's levels to all of it, and you just have to be aware that, everybody wants to be treated like a human being, right? If you're going into it transactionally, what's in it for me, you lose. You're going to lose with that mindset before you even step out of the gate. So how that's translated is being surrounded with people like him feed my abundance mindset. So what did I do? Every time I go to a mastermind, I open the door to my friend and I say, listen, having this guy in my portfolio, in my business, has been tremendously beneficial. I will gladly make that introduction for the people that I connect with, that I'm friendly with. I get nothing out of that other than it helps both sides. I don't line my pocket with that, but again, there's so much to this world, and we can have a very expansive approach or a very confined death grip type of approach on it. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want to practice like that. And I don't want to treat my team like that. I'm expansive with my team.
Okay, so this is a cool thing that you went after, because one of the things I think about when you talk about this, connecting people and putting the good vibes out, and it's going to enrich their lives, is some people will utilize that in order to consume what is known as moral dessert, which is where you do something good and then you kind of cash in your good to excuse yourself for something bad. But I hear you continually trying to bring that forth in the practice overall. So how do you avoid that issue of wanting to consume the moral dessert?
I'm confused by when somebody's going to do that to cash in something bad, right? Like, I have built a culture that it is my number one asset for my company. So I can't imagine that there's anything I'm trying to do to cash in for a moral dessert. First of all, I don't eat dessert, right? So maybe that has something to do with it. Like, I'm very disciplined. I don't eat sugar. So for me, dessert is short-term gratification with long-term ramifications, right? And that's just not how I view life, food, exercise, anything. How you do anything reflects, no matter how small it is, in how you do everything, right? So for me, you can literally ask anybody that's in my firm. I just had this conversation with my HR head. People like, how do I make a lot of money? Very simple. Make yourself undeniable.
Yeah.
And you will never have to come to me for money, because I will come to you and say, you are valuable. I see you. I value you. I literally go into the marketplace to value people. And I'm talking quarterly. I do conversations, or if somebody's really high achieving, I'm looking at their value at least every 6 months to say, has their value changed in the marketplace? Right? So it's not about what I'm going to get in the short term. It's about what's best for my business. And what's best for my business is best for my clients. Right? And ultimately, we all have the same vision at the law firm, which is serving the client at the highest level.
So you talk about the culture, and I can hear so much of it expressing through. It's amazing. Like, if you're only listening to this and you can't see, like, Tom moves physically forward and kind of lights up as he's talking about this sort of stuff. So I'm curious, how would you describe the culture that you have cultivated over, the last arguably 23 years of owning a law firm?
Yeah. So it really has crystallized at this point, right? We're doing EOS. And so how I would describe it is, we are ferocious advocates, right? Like, you're not going to meet lawyers. For the lawyers I have right now, you will not meet lawyers that will outwork us anywhere, right? And I can say that confidently, because that's how we're now going into, I converted my PI silo into a trial silo. So superior lawyering is one of our core values. Kind candor. We're kind, we're direct, right? And so you can be both. And so that's kind of how our culture has evolved. We're innovative. We constantly are saying, how can we do better in litigation? How can we do better at trial? How can we do better at the business of law? So our culture is built on the core values. There's three others, but it's built on the core values, and really it's about alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they the right person? Do they live the core values? Do they love the core values? Do they really resonate? And people
Yeah.
think just because I got gray hair, you can't fake it till you make it. It either speaks to who you are or not. So it's probably similar with you. Like your coaching clients can say, oh, your mission vision align with me. They speak to me, but you know pretty quickly if they do or they don't.
Yeah.
And if they don't, you just say, now it's time for a candid conversation. Like, why would you want to force something where there's no alignment?
Yeah.
Right.
There's no money that can buy alignment.
No.
So the core values, I have to ask, it's one of those points where a lot of firms have core values as they're on the sheet of paper, but they don't exist within the firm. How do you keep the core values alive and flourishing within the firm?
We talk about them all the time. We reward instances where it's just a superior example of like lawyering, paralegaling, like we do say to somebody, listen, thank you for the feedback. You're really espousing kind candor, right? And where there's not alignment, we talk about it just as openly. And in the event that it's non-alignment or misalignment for, a certain period of time, we just say, look, there's a better fit out there for you and for us, right? And you'll be happier in the long run. And that just kind of is how it goes, we want, and here's the thing, the core value exercise, and I don't know how many of your listeners are newer entrepreneurs versus, seasoned decades long.
It'll be a fair range.
Okay. It takes it took me 10 years to crystallize this, 15 years to crystallize this. And I didn't copy them from someone else. Like they started out 10 years ago with a totally different coaching process. And we built them. Then we worked them. Then we built them. Then we sat down for, a 7-8 hour session at EOS, me and my leadership team at the time, and said, what are our real core values? Not what belongs on a piece of paper. What do we live, breathe, and eat that is our competitive advantage? And that's how we were able to distill it down.
So what I hear sometimes is people who talk about core values or have we'll say mixed relationship with core values, Tom, is they say, well, if they were core values, wouldn't you know them the moment that you said them, and that it should be easier than taking a decade? What would you say to that individual?
Everything that I know about business is an iteration. It's all an iteration. You jump ugly. If you're like me, you jump ugly, right? You don't wait for perfect. You jump, and then you continue to build. You continue to improve, and I am continuing to improve regularly. I have people right now that are pushing me in the best of ways. They're challenging my mindset. They're challenging my fear of letting go. Right. And I realized I was away for 2 weeks on vacation recently. And I realized I still have some threads deep inside that are rooted in this fear of letting go of control, despite the fact that I have really seasoned people now. I'm talking decades of experience. And by allowing those people the freedom to speak openly to me, I'm like, oh, I get it. You're right. I don't need to talk to you about this. You got it. Right now I walk in, I go, and I walk out, and I literally go, I was about to check in on something out of fear that's really, I don't need to check in on.
There you go. Because it'll show up in the KPIs, right?
It shows up in the KPIs, but it's also, I have hired really excellent people. Like, what am I doing? If I need to check in on something that is really in their wheelhouse, it's why I hired them, and they've proven themselves. They're on the leadership team at this point. Like, they've proven themselves. So I literally am taking a step back every time before I check in. And so that builds the culture too, because once the people are part of the process and you're giving them authority, you're giving them empowerment, they're protective of the culture too, right? So they only want people that are the right people in the right seats.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about levels, and you're at an advanced level on this journey of core values, culture. I mean, your willingness to catch yourself in the moment and say, "Oh, Tom, step back. Trust this person. This is what they're supposed to be doing." And you have the bottom level of that, which is like no decision can be made without the owner. I'm curious, looking back on sort of the earlier iterations of yourself, the earlier levels, what would you tell that version of yourself to make the progress faster?
That's a really good question. So for somebody like me, I think I had to go through the iterations, right?
Yeah.
Because like to tell somebody you got to let go is a simple statement, but it's a really complex analysis. You have to have the right people in place to let go. You have to have the right infrastructure. You have to have the resources to build that infrastructure to let go. Otherwise, what you're probably doing in the very beginning, or what I was doing, was you're building infrastructure that's very price sensitive, and you can't let go because you can't afford the type of players you need to let go. So for me, I don't know that there's any magic word other than what my jiu-jitsu instructor used to say to me all the time. Tom, relax, relax. You're so tense, relax. So like the idea of breathing and relaxing, that has been extremely helpful. I know it sounds really silly, but meditation is the only thing that has, it's not the only thing. There are a million tools you can employ. Meditation has been instrumental in elevating my leadership game because of what it's allowed me to do to tame the things I needed to tame, to control the things I needed to control, and to let go of the things I needed to let go of.
So here's what I really appreciate, Tom, is when you were talking about, saying, oh, I would have had to go through all of the iterations. First off, I think that is the most earnest answer that can possibly be given to that question. Because yes, you do have to experience these things to get to those levels. That's the reason there is a ladder on most journeys.
Right.
And when you started talking about it, it was interesting how you rolled it back to some very pragmatic things, even all the way coming back to, you have to buy the tools according to, the resources that you have available to you. So in resource management, looping that back to the whole saver, investor, you're not someone who, needs to have a fleet of Lamborghinis, in your garage to be happy. Is there ever a time, or let me actually reframe this. If you could go back and invest faster in some of those resources, where would you have invested the money at this might have scared me pace?
Coaching.
Okay.
Hands down. Look, 30 years ago, they didn't have coaches.
Yeah.
Right? They wouldn't, like, if there were masterminds, I wasn't aware of them. Right? So, and which is weird because I became pretty aware of them pretty fast once they started cropping up.
Yeah.
But it's hands down, there are literally, so I met a guy through a Slack mastermind, Ryan McKean's best era, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
I mean, if you're an associate in a law firm and you have an entrepreneurial bent, you may want to try cases. You can't spend $3 a month. It's literally less than a cup of coffee. And I'm telling you, like, the value's there, right? So if I could accelerate it where I would spend more money faster with the right coaches, with the right masterminds, because now everybody's got something out there they're selling. And so I think it becomes really important to, like, for the people that they know the coaching works, right? So like your clientele, for them to spread the word about the impact it's had, because there's a lot of people out there calling themselves coaches that don't necessarily, it might not be where some people want to spend the money. Does that make sense?
That's fair to say.
Yeah. So the coaches I've had, I've been blessed. I mean, right out of the gate, I started with a group. They were awesome. It was for the fundamentals. I did it in a year, and then I went on to more advanced stuff. If it was around earlier, which it was, and I just didn't know it, a friend of mine was doing it for like 10 years before he turned me on to it. I'm like, man, why didn't you tell me about this? I would have spent the money. I would have already been, way more down the line. You know what I mean? So that's the one area that as soon as you graduate, you can start investing in it. That's the other thing they don't tell you from law school is you have to pay to play. You have to invest in yourself. Don't expect somebody else to invest in you.
Yeah. I very early on, after graduating, one of the things I invested in was a copywriting course. And it was from this company, AWAI. I put $500 down on a credit card that already had debt on it because I was like,
Right.
no, this is a skill that I got to learn.
Right.
Who cares about the debt? I'm going to live a very long life. And that's just a little bit of today's money for tomorrow's incredibly bright future. On the levels conversation, I'm curious, what's the next level or two that you're looking at for yourself and the firm?
So they're kind of intertwined. So for the firm is to get to that 8-figure level. And yesterday we had a trial that was starting yesterday morning that settled, mid morning to late morning for the right result. Right. So now that we converted to a trial silo, the negotiations are not really negotiations anymore because we just say, look, this is the value of the case. You want to pay us? You don't want to pay us? We're ready to go to trial. And we were, but that's what led the result, to be. So as I'm driving home from the courthouse, I'm like, I'm ready for an 8-figure verdict. And, again, and I was only in the courthouse. I'll tell you, like, it was the weirdest thing. I was telling my trial guys yesterday, I said, you know how weird it is to sit in the back of the courtroom and hear my name being over and over repeated by the judge as we're kind of putting the settlement on the record. And I'm not the guy doing it anymore. So the next iteration of that is my team taking 8-figure verdicts, my law firm getting to the multiple 8-figure level, and me just operating at the highest CEO level that I can as a leader. But by the same token, scaling back anything in the weeds at all. Just continuing to stay in the CEO role.
What scares you most about that transition?
Having to really root out every thread of fear. So in other words, it's hard to explain. I was away, I was hiking in the mountains, and I was like, I got this little thread of fear internal about something that's so ridiculous. My whole team has it. And the process of really letting go, I'm talking complete letting go, other than ethics and lawyering stuff that I'm always responsible for my license on the wall. But I have lawyers now that are so high level, they're the ones that do the lawyering on everything. But to completely let go with abandonment, like think about when you fell in love with your wife. There's layers to letting go. You're like, I love you. Ooh, but I really love you. Ooh, you got to let go to the point with reckless abandon with your wife. And you go, man, that's scary. That's scary. But you can't lead at the highest levels if you don't do it. You got to let go of that fear.
I love the idea that the thing that is the scariest is actually rooting out the fear and having to confront that. And if you're confronting it, I'm curious, how are you helping your own leaders root out their fear and confront it?
We are dealing with that literally as we're talking about it right now. So what I did was I said, look, we get a marketing bill and we have a different marketing person.
Yeah.
I said, look, you can't do what you've always done or you'll stay where you've always been. Right. So if somebody's listening to this, they're at the 3 to 5 million level and you want to go to 8 figures, you got to spend more money on marketing.
Yep.
Reset your mindset. And so I said, look, it becomes a value proposition. Do you see the value? Yes, I see the value. Then don't worry about the price tag because that's the investment. That's the ante up at the table to get into the 8-figure club. What does it take? It takes the right infrastructure. So I've got a hugely different team than I did it at the levels that I was at. And it's a much more significant investment. It takes technology. Now I have different case management software, way more money than my old investment, and marketing. It takes those three things to scale. And so I'm dragging my team along when I notice it now because I have the 8-figure mindset. And when I notice it in them, I go, stop. Don't do what we used to do, or we're going to stay where we used to be. Embrace the mindset as if we're already at the other level. What would you spend on marketing to get to 10 million a year? what would you spend on infrastructure to get to 10 million a year? And what would you spend on technology? Those three things. And so all of a sudden I just exhaled and I brought them with me into that mindset. And I just encourage them. I go, look, check it with meditation or reflection or whatever it is that gets you in the headspace to go, oh, you know what? I do have the old mindset, but I don't want to stay where we were.
Yeah. Do they seek out or have access to coaching?
So what they're doing right now, because I have managers and I have coaches for them one-on-one, like some of them are doing one-on-one coaching. And then there's different skills classes they can take. Because to me, that's an investment in my team. So when you ask me, like, where do you invest and what do you recommend? First, invest as much as you can, as fast as you can in yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Therapy, coaching, all that stuff. Then invest in your team. The A players, they only get better, and you're not wasting your money because they're not going to leave. They're going to see the value that you're creating, and you're going to pay them more money because they're creating more value.
Absolutely. And by the way, be proactive in that coaching if you see someone who needs it, because it's funny. I was just talking with a family member, and they probably don't want me to air their dirty laundry, so I won't name names.
Right.
But they were saying, like, yeah, our company gives us access to a career coach, and everyone knows it's the person that you talk to who coaches you out of working for that company.
Okay.
Because they're not proactively coaching you; it's all reactive coaching instead.
Right.
So you've brought up meditation a couple of times here. What does a meditation protocol look like for you, Tom?
Okay. So everybody that's listening, there's going to be people that are like, I can't meditate, my mind, blah, blah, blah. No one. And I will tell you, I don't know. I don't care if you have 100,000 listeners. There's nobody's brain who is more disjointed and broken than mine. I don't know if I have ADD. I don't know if I have ADHD undiagnosed, but so if I can do it, anybody can do it. And it was as simple as the way my brain works is I don't like waste when it comes to money. So I forced myself to sample a couple of different meditation apps. I went with Headspace. I paid like $350 for the lifetime, or $450 for the lifetime subscription, because I knew I would use it because it would make me crazy that I wasted $450. Right? So here's what it looks like for me. Every day I get up and I force myself to do it, even if it's like, I think in terms of micro increments, or what's the minimum effective dose, right? So I'll say, look, if I don't want to do it or I've fallen off the horse, can I do a minute? Of course you can do a minute with your eyes closed. Next thing you know, now I'm back to 20 minutes a day, half an hour a day. I force myself to do it after I have a cup of coffee in the morning. And so many things come to you through just sitting in the silence. So do you meditate, Charlie?
I do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So know, like, so many things come to you when you let your brain do the work that it wants to do in just calm silence.
Well, and you and I actually share an approach to this, which is like the atomic habits approach of minimum viable. Yes, same thing. Yes. My whole thing is, so like I'll set a timer on the Apple Watch that I've got on, and I'll usually set it for about 3 minutes. And if at 3 minutes I want to keep going, I keep going. And if at the end of 3 minutes I go, if I continue any longer, my kids are going to be late for school, I'm going to let myself go ahead and take care of that. Right. Like that's
right.
You meet the moment and you know that you have handled that for yourself. Are there any other consistent habits that you keep like that?
Exercise for sure. Right. Yeah. If you're a lawyer, if you're a business coach, whatever it is, like, and I know you're big on fitness too. I saw you were running with your daughter over the weekend. And I love that. And
it was awesome.
I think it's important, especially one, your health is your wealth. Yeah. So like all these lawyers, and I see them, and they're grossly overweight, and they're eating just anything they put in their mouth. You're going to spend a ton of time and money to then get your health back if you're lucky and you can, versus having a heart attack or some devastating health event. So to me, your health is your wealth, your physical and your mental health. Exercise to me helps my brain. It helps the stress that comes with a growing business and all the stresses that come with it. Right. Yeah. So, exercise hands down. Also reading, like I shut the screen off at night and I read and I just naturally am able to fall asleep because I'm just reading and letting my brain, again, giving my brain some time to relax and just unplug from the day.
Oh, absolutely. And, so I have a couple of clients who have dealt with health issues, overweight, and I am always unbelievably proud of them whenever they just share like, hey, this is the remedial step that I'm taking to improve this. I'm like, that is such a valuable investment in yourself. And I'm right there with you, Tom. Health is wealth. And, I'll admit, and I'm curious if it's like this for you, that there are times where I look at my need to exercise. I'm like, does this border on addiction? And does that make it a little unhealthy?
100% for me. They're both addictions, meditation and exercise, but it's a better addiction than a lot of the other vices that I could have had that I see a lot of trial lawyers and a lot of lawyers have that I have no interest in bringing into my family, into my business. So it's a healthy addiction, but I'm not skipping workouts unless I'm physically unable to do it. And meditation is a little trickier because my brain is so wired to bebop around that there's always that part of my brain is like, let's skip it today. We'll be fine. But I'm just better on the days that I do it.
Yeah. That's actually one of my favorite things about doing a podcast like this, like talking with you right now, is I don't worry about anything else in the world. My brain is just right here, right now, rather than running through the like 52 things that I'm sure are on some productivity list somewhere. So this is like my conversational meditation to talk with someone like you, Tom.
Right.
So
right.
If people are vibing with this and like, I want to learn more from this guy, I would love to see more of his perspective, etc. Where should we send them?
Sure. My LinkedIn, right? You just put in TonaLaw, I'll pop up. You'll see the same picture you see on the podcast. I have a podcast, Lead Counsel. And I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you promoting that stuff for me. And really, again, the stuff I put out is the stuff that I wish I had 30 years ago coming on. That I think it's so much easier for people to accelerate success and growth in the profession of law and the business of law and coaching even, because there's so many resources, right? Like we didn't have guys like you 30 years ago. I wish we did, right? I've been at those masterminds. I just didn't have them. And now you can bypass millions of dollars in mistakes. You could be healthier about the way you do things. So it's a good time for young lawyers for sure, and young business coaches and young business professionals. It's a good time.
Absolutely. All right. One last little 3-part question for you. And that is, what are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
Sure. Reading. I am reading Never Split the Difference again from like my 13th time. I saw you share that on
social media. Good book. Good book.
Yeah. It's a good book, and all of life is a negotiation. Sometimes I find myself practicing in my house, right? I got a 14-year-old. I got a wife. And so sometimes I'll be like, he always says, ask good questions and active listening, both of which make you a better spouse and a better father, in a household. So I highly recommend that. What I'm watching is a 9-part series on Netflix about the evolution of nuclear weapons and the nuclear war, and how close we are to nuclear war, and how it evolved over the years, and how we are currently so on the precipice of a hair trigger extinction of all of society, really. So not to bring anybody down, but what my wife was like, why are you watching this? And I'm like, if you don't understand history, you're bound to repeat it. And so I'd like to have a good grasp on what was the evolution of how we've gotten to this nuclear armament that we're now in a standoff with between, Russia, China, and, the allies. So I found that very interesting. And then what was the other thing you asked me? What I'm listening to?
Yeah.
Podcasts, man. I'm such a fan of, podcasts and Audible. I always have something that is going to make me better in some way that I could take, different things from like your podcast or, Beyond the Breeze with Brian Glass or any host of them. There's so many good podcasts out there. And, I plug Lead Counsel again because I created that podcast because I wanted to open up listeners to a world I now have access to of guests that I never had before. And it would take them 20, 30 years to get access to those rooms, to those people. Right.
That's a very cool perspective.
Yeah. So that's really what I'm reading, what I'm doing, and, I appreciate you doing this too, because you're giving a ton of value out to a lot of people. And I love the people that you have on. So, I'm excited to be part of it now.
Oh, excited to have you here, Tom. Truly, this is an absolute treat. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I appreciate your energy, enthusiasm, insight, experience, all that good stuff that you just brought to the table. So that way, someone who's, a couple decades behind you on the journey can find those golden nuggets in there and move the journey along a little bit faster for themselves. So thank you so much, Tom.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
And we will see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.